Welcome to No Buzzwords. Thanks for joining us again. Today we have Paulsbo legend. If you've ever gotten groceries at Central Market, and for all of you true people that are from Paulsbo, it is still Central Market. We have Jamie Zach joining us today in studio. Thanks for joining us, Jamie.
You're welcome. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. Yes. You were we cut you off. You were talking about one of the Sonics players.
Oh, Slick Watch.
Yeah.
Yeah. He had a cleaning service. We were just talking about the championship, 79. And, I was in high school at the time in Redmond High School, and right before my parents moved over here in when did we move here? We moved that year, 79, right after my 10th grade year. So.
Wow.
Yeah. And I kind of disappeared. In fact, Redmond High School, in my annual, me and another guy, Sean Reel, our pictures were switched in our annual. So I disappeared from even there. So
no.
Yeah. In the annual, I have my picture is in his spot and his picture is in my spot.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, not that we look like that anymore.
So why the move from Redmond?
Dad had a job at Keyport. He was commuting from Redmond. And getting up at 3 and getting home at 6 every day kind of got old.
Yeah.
So and parents were from here. Actually, they were their families moved here during the war or prior to from the Midwest, and that's when my parents met in Bremerton, and they were married at Our Savior's First Lutheran Church in 1954, and so they were kind of coming back, and so Dad had gotten this job, and he was working for Boeing, got laid off, and then worked for this other company, Rocket Research, which they made the little some jets for the Martian lander, one of the Martian landers.
Oh, cool!
Wow. So they're since gone. There were a think there were a bunch of Boeing guys that started this Rocket Research.
Huh.
And anyway, Dad worked for them for a while, and then they took a tank, and he ended up working, got a job with the government with at Keyport. So he was commuting for 2 or 3 years, which, it just got old. And, we had 3 acres and lots to do and a couple horses. And like I was saying earlier, that's kind of was my thing. And it was a great place to grow up. I'm incredibly thankful for my parents. They're both gone. But they, sorry, wow. Think about getting emotional like that.
That's great.
But
what were their names?
There, it was paradise. We had, horses, and I rode every day, and maybe not every day, fished every day probably, and didn't do any homework, like I was saying. We just I don't know how I made it through school, honestly. That was kind of an aside. You get up and go to school, and you come home and go fishing.
Right.
And we had my best friend, Victor. He was integral in instigating, like you, Adam, all the things that we did.
Yeah. Every friend group has a Pied Piper.
Yeah, I mean, and we had a bunch of other guys we palled around with, but I did stay in contact with Victor for all my life till he passed away. He did it a few years back. He was 57, so miss him, man.
Early.
That hurt. Same year as my mom, actually, 2019. So mom was 90, Victor was 57, and
2019 was a rough year.
It was pretty tough, in many ways. We're kind of talking in circles, but not sequentially, if that's all right.
Yeah.
That year was I didn't realize how hard it was. I ended up drinking a lot. And I was just after losing my friend, I was so sad. I just didn't realize how deeply hurt and how sad I was. And so drinking became an easy way to just cope with it. And so I come home and I'd be thinking about what I was going to be drinking, every day. And it went on for quite a while. And my my wife, Sue, said one day, something's going to change or something's going to change. Oh. Okay. So I signed up for some counseling, and we had the EAP at work, and it's all anonymous, of course. And
what's EAP?
Employee Assistance Program. So most companies have some sort of you guys probably have one at
Yeah.
where you guys work,
Yeah.
and it's just a lifeline, and it's just a resource, so they kind of point you in the right direction.
Right.
And I didn't realize I kind of needed that until Sue came along and said that. And we've been married for a long time, since 1985, and so it'll be 40 years this year that we've been married.
Wow.
So
Congratulations.
yeah, thanks. Yeah, I'll tell you more about her later. She's an incredible human being. But she said, that, and I hooked up with a counselor over through the EAP, and Ken, I can't remember his last name, but he just kind of unraveled things and helped me kind of set a course, that was weeding through all the muck and the garbage that had just I'd allowed to accumulate. And alcohol certainly, I was drinking when I talked to him. He says, you're drinking now? Oh, yeah. I had this big glass of wine, and I'm, it's 4:30 or whatever my time was. Before it's 5 o'clock somewhere.
Yeah.
And, I was into that.
Almost 5 o'clock.
It's almost 5 o'clock. Well, it's 5 o'clock somewhere.
Yeah.
So, just really was something that was just more of a habit. So it was beer and wine, and then hard alcohol later, and it got more and more and more. And I think my wife, she grew up, her mom was an alcoholic, and she just really concerned her, which and I was concerning her, and she's going through cancer treatment. Well, how the caretaker needed a caretaker, and so it was just an awful time for all of us. And
lockdowns were coming.
Yes, exactly. This is prior to COVID, all of that. Wow. So, excuse me. Luckily, I got to this counselor, and he asked me, do you want to do on the first day, he asked me, are you drinking now? Oh, yeah. I said, oh, okay. So he didn't say anything more. And then it just kind of, the next session, he proposed, maybe the next one after that, do you want to do a challenge? Do you want to just have one pour a day? Okay. So I tried that. And then I'm doing one pour a day, and I'm pouring a glass of wine, one pour, and then drinking that to the very top, and who's kidding who? And so then he challenged me also to get my hearing checked, and my kids are saying, "Dad, you can't hear." What? And at work I was probably talking super loud, and so I got my hearing checked. I'm talking to my doctor, and a guy at Paulsbo, Dr. Anderson, Brad. He's a great guy.
Yeah, I go to Dr. Brad Anderson.
Yeah, all right. Yeah, wasn't that funny? Good guy. I retired 2 doctors, by the way, Dr. Bethel and Dr. Hadley. So this guy's young, so I'm thinking, well, he'll be there till I go.
Is he at Sound Health? Is that
Sound Health?
Yeah, I also.
Yeah, he and his wife is there too.
Not for a long time, but
yeah. Yeah, it's a good group.
That was
So
my last physical. Shout out to Brad.
yeah, I had mine there too. So he goes, he was doing my hearing thing, and I was telling him, I said, the counselor suggested that I take, one pour a day, and he goes, well, I don't agree with that. Either all or nothing. Just one pour a day becomes a bigger pour, and I'm thinking, God, have you been watching me?
Wow.
And it just kind of clicked in my head, and I'm thinking, wow, this is not good. So I'm making my daughter Jessica lives up on Whidbey Island. She and her husband live up there, and so there was some part that we were talking about Nick, my son-in-law, worked at Kingston Lumber at the time, and ordered some window parts. So and they needed it to fix part of their house. So I drove it up there. I thought, well, I'll just take it up there as a Wednesday or whatever. And my daughter said, Daddy, you're kind of tired. You want to stay overnight? Okay. And do you want a glass of wine? And this is after I've been doing the one pour a day, and after I talked to Brad, it was about a month, and I continued, and then he asked me if I wanted to continue. So okay, sure, I do that. And she said, do you want a glass of wine? I go, no, Jessica, I don't think I will. So that's the last drop of alcohol I had since. So that's 2020. So it'll be 5 years this November.
Wow.
Yeah. So I sure sleep better. So anybody that's struggling with alcohol, get some help, because I wouldn't have done it had I not talked to this guy, and I was lucky. I could just step away from it. I mean, I still have a glass of wine at home, and I can pour a glass of wine for her. I just don't need it. Beer, I don't miss it. People are drinking that hop water. I missed a beer, and this guy's buying like 3 or 4 6-packs, like $50. I'm thinking, wow,
Yeah.
I've saved so much money. I used to spend $100 on alcohol. We go to Costco, I'd buy, that, and I just so thankful that, my wife is just so steady and a barometer. Not that I listen to her all the time, but of course, guys, you do your own thing. But
it's amazing how sneaky it is.
Yeah,
it's amazing how something
Alcohol?
sneaks into your life. Yeah, or any kind of addiction.
Yeah,
I think the newest substance that is sneaking into people's lives without them realizing it is social media and the phone.
Yeah,
just this motion.
Exactly.
That's mine. That's my alcohol. If I'm doing that in the middle of a weekday, I might as well be drinking at work.
And you're ignoring your kids or people around you. I'm guilty of that. I think we all are. It's just so easy. Alcohol, I call it the great lie. It promises everything, but takes everything from you. My neighbor died from alcoholism and just drank himself to death. And I'm just great guy, very creative, was a blacksmith and could make all this cool stuff, and I just couldn't stop.
Couldn't put it down.
Can really take your life.
I just heard somewhere that our generation, millennials, and now the next generation, alcohol is actually becoming less and less prevalent.
Yeah.
With it's not what people are necessarily turning to right now, and they're seeing it in the alcohol industry, and that they're not buying as much as they used to, which is awesome. I was just talking to a guy this last week, and he said, this is an older guy, and this was back, you could drink while driving, and just beer was everywhere. And he said he was a heavy equipment operator, and they would get on the job in the morning, and he would have his 12-pack in the excavator.
Yeah.
And he's like, you'd finish that by lunch, and then you go get beer at lunch and come back for your, and you'd finish another 12-pack for the afternoon. And then you'd get off work and go drink.
Yeah. Heavier stuff.
Heavier stuff. Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. It's just light beer earlier.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, that sounds familiar. A lot of the guys, the butchers would have they wouldn't tell you that, but there's a bottle in the back. Some of them.
Yeah.
Holidays. So I'm thinking, imagine a butcher drinking. It's pretty rare, but it happened.
Yeah.
It was just socially, that's kind of what you did. Nobody, and you could drive. Unthinkable.
Excuse me, is that a finger in the display case? How did that get in there? Is that yours? Are you drunk?
Yeah, it's certainly changed over the years. In fact, when I was in grocery, the butchers, when I remember starting, the code was sawdust on the floor to catch the blood. That was code, and that's how they had to do it. So we had wooden cutting boards and or blocks, and sawdust on the floor was changed every night.
Yeah.
So catch the blood worked pretty good. So apparently clean. I don't know, but can you imagine dropping a piece of meat on the floor and we'll just dust it off. And
I can imagine doing that.
Well, sure. Yeah. And the butcher, he used to smoke. Norm, our butcher, he would have a cigarette, Bel Air 100. I remember him smoking. And Sue actually was a meat wrapper for him later. And at that time, he could still smoke in the stores. And he had a cigarette going down at the cutting table. And at the wrapping station down at the other end, he'd have a cigarette going here. So he'd go back and forth between the two.
Wow.
And it was the craziest time.
That's wild.
And the cigarette ash would be burning off down to the end and hanging off the tray.
And your surgeon at the hospital is doing the same thing.
Oh gosh, yes. Yeah, the gravelly voice and
the other butcher.
The other butcher. Ugh. Yeah.
So when did you get into grocery?
Well, the reason you're on the show, just for the listeners, is I was going through the checkout stand at Town and Country, aka or formerly known as Central Market here in Paulsbo. Yeah. And they started putting years on the name tags, and I noticed that yours said 34, and I was like, does that mean you've been here for 34 years? And Central Market, now TNC, is it's sort of a the hub of one of the hubs of the North Kitsap culture.
Yeah.
And it's so much of the history is tied up with that grocery store. So I was like, that would be a fun conversation to talk to this guy who's been working for this Paulsbo institution for so long. So that's what brought you, Jamie, onto the show, and we're really excited to have you. Anyways, your question.
34 years. So what happened 34 years ago that got you to Central Market or TNC?
Actually,
Paulsbo?
before that, I worked in a grocery store in Kingston, and I worked for. So I started after my parents moved, so it was a summer, and I met Kelly Waterman, who worked for Rick in Kingston, the little Olympic Food Center, a little grocery store. So you should get a job down there.
Which is now grocery market, and they just buy that out. Is that
It's a
same-
grocery outlet.
Grocery outlet, yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
So there's been a couple renditions of owners through there. Well, one guy after Rick closed the Thriftway, it turned into something else, and they were that way for a while. I don't know how long they operated.
I know it was Food Market. I think it was just called the Food Market.
The Food Market.
Before turning into the grocery outlet.
I think they had a company that they owned 5 or 6 other markets, and so this is another one that they opened up and operated. And I think Sean Stark worked for them too. No, Sean's another guy that he works at TNC. He's the front end manager there.
Okay.
And Sean's worked for Rick, and we were talking one day about we kind of have the same kind of history working for Rick Bjornson, which I have, I kind of not a tumultuous relationship, but after you leave a place, there's some hard feelings because
Adam would know
you
that.
asked me how I started, and I had worked for Rick for 10 years, and through high school, and then through college I was a graphics major at Shoreline, and
Oh, that's cool.
yeah, it was I was kind of I started painting in high school, and so I was kind of artsy, and
You're a visual artist.
that's my thing. That's my other thing. Yeah, and so that was my parents were kind of wanting to make sure I didn't like fall off the planet somewhere and make art somewhere and
Smart.
not live and not eat. And so graphics became more of a acceptable manner of maybe employment. And so anyway, Shoreline had a program, a graphic arts program. So, but right before I graduated, desktop publishing hit. So that tells you how old I am. So there were no computers when I started this, and then computers came in, and desktop publishing hit, changed everything. So in other words, we used to take type, and you would print it out and mechanically have to lay it out on your graphic, which would be then photographed, made into a printing plate, and then printed. And so then when it was all digital, it changed everything. And so I said, well, I don't want to do that. So computers were not really even
They were just getting
remotely
started.
interesting to me. And so I became an art major, and I decided to kind of go off my own thing. And I think that summer I took after I would have graduated, I took a pottery class, and John Kirk was the art teacher he was a pottery teacher, and really kind of encouraged me to keep going. And so there's a lot of interests that I have, and pottery is one of them. So I decided that next year to go to Whitworth College. I had gone Campus Life. Do you remember Campus Life? Campus Life is a youth organization, kind of like Young Life.
Okay.
And Mark Halland was the director when I was in high school. And anyway, he... there's a lot. I'm thinking about all these things that are happening. And
You've lived a whole life.
All that whole time. There's so many things that happened in my life. Prior to that, I was going to tell you, I became a Christian in 1980, and I was raised Lutheran, and I teased my mom. I would just call it frozen chosen. You get
That's the Lutheran?
Yeah, you get to church early to sit in the back row, and you just you're very you don't take anything off the plate until somebody offers it to you, that kind of thing. It's all probably Midwestern mostly. But anyway, that summer I became a Christian, and I had an incredible physical experience. And
Really?
It turned... I had some things happen prior to as a youth that I just felt worthless. And this experience I was painting. My friend Don Spittler and I were painting on. He was another artist kind of guy. He was a homeschool guy and loved to paint. And so we'd go places and we'd set up our little easels and paint.
Oh, that's cool.
And so we were. My parents had a house in Kingston, and so we were on the back deck and painting. And he said, "All you have to do is say a prayer." And so I said this prayer, and I'm telling you, I was cleaned out like this.
Wow.
Came down out of my head and swirled around in my heart, and I just had this incredible physical experience, and I felt like everything was coming out of my fingertips, and I was just cleaned.
Whoa.
It was just wild.
Wow.
Yeah, I mean, I can still feel it. I'm getting chills down the back of my head, and since then, of course, I've had a life in between that time, and not perfect, but I just really wanted to know that point. I had this just indelible faith that just, I just kind of know where I'm going.
Wow.
Nice.
I don't know how great of an example I've been, to my kids. I hope so. We've got, 4 daughters. I haven't talked about that. But at that time, there was so much happening, and I was talking about the graphics, and so going through all this and learning, you're in your 20s and trying to figure stuff out, and I just knew I had to do something else, and so I really wanted to be an art major, and so I ended up going to the most expensive school to be an art major. I went to Whitworth College in Spokane, and it was just. It was nice to go away. I don't know if you've ever had that experience of being just kind of taken out from where you are and somewhere else. The climate's different, and Spokane's just a different
You lived in
place.
Spokane for a second.
Yeah, I went to Eastern for a while.
Oh, okay.
So we lived in Cheney, and then we hopped the border and lived in Post Falls just for a little bit.
Yeah. All right, so your family moved there.
Yeah, I had 2 kids at the time and my wife.
Oh, okay. So
Yeah.
when you were like an adult.
Yeah.
Right on. Yeah, it's Eastern. Interesting. I took a trip out there. There was a.
He had kids, but the term adult can be used loosely.
Yeah. Well, it's funny. That's what my wife says. We have 4 daughters. She'd tell people we have 4 daughters, and they're still raising their father.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
That would be Sue. So she's got a great sense of humor. Well, you probably remember her from TNC.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was just a crazy time. So that's how I ended up in Spokane. But I mentioned Whitworth. We had stopped there on a campus life trip, and I had gone that next year to Big Sky Camp, and we happened to stop and stay overnight at Whitworth campus, and I stayed in the dorm that I ended up living in. So because I'm walking around the campus, and I saw this beautiful campus. I don't know if you ever walk Whitworth campus. Is just the pines, and it's just a gorgeous place. And I'm walking around looking at all the buildings, and it was summertime, and I thought, I just had this. I'm going to go here. And so that next year, I think I was going to graduate in the spring of 1981. My dad had gone to Western. We went up there. He thought, well, this would be a school for you. So we went up there and looked around. He ran into a couple profs that he had, because he went there as an older student. And so they were still there. And he met a couple of them on the campus. And anyway, on the way back, I go, nah, I don't think I'll go there. So I ended up going to Whitworth. And that's where I met Sue.
Oh, okay.
And so I met her during Jan term, which was a 1-month course that we take, and we were in the lunchroom, and there were 2 lunchrooms. There was the we call them the granolas down below, and the normal conventional food up front. So no hamburgers down below, but up above you could. And so my plan was up above, because I wasn't eating. I just wanted to eat normal, what I felt, normal food. But she was into health food, so that's where she ate. But during Jan term, there was just one, and so that's the only reason why we met, actually, is because she was up there, and we met during lunch. And then after, I don't know, a while back, we ran into each other in the library, and I'm taking the Gospel of Mark class, and that was
like a fun class.
It was a class on the Gospel of Mark.
Wow.
So I'm I think I was in the history. She was studying at the table. I was studying in there too, and we ran across each other, and we ended up talking for, I don't know, 3 hours probably. And so we hit it off. That was about February 11th to 12th. I think we went out on one date. 3 days later, I asked her to marry me.
Wow.
Nice.
Took her 2 weeks to tell me. So she had her standards, she said. So that's...
So you were the classic, like, you went to a Bible college and came out with a major in something and your wife.
Yes, exactly.
That's
A major
stigma,
couldn't make any money.
the stigma of Bible colleges.
Yeah. Well, and that time Whitworth was a college,
Yeah.
and now they're a university. So, it's kind of funny because my dad went to Western College. It was not a university at the time. And so I thought that was kind of cool. I picked a cause. It was a college, and, tiny school, and it was a great experience. I learned, a lot. There was some things academically, it wasn't really my forte. I was more interested in just what was going on and painting, and so that was my thing. I also did ceramics, so I felt like I think something tangible. And, painting is tangible, but I've always been interested in the visual arts. I've always had some sort of thing going on.
Yeah.
I had a pottery business for about 10 or 15 years, and I was selling my pottery at the Kingston Farmers Market.
Really?
Nice.
Yeah. And kids, in fact, it was great because I would take 1 or 2 daughters down to help me. And they would get up, and we'd get down there. They'd help me slough it all to the little tent and set it up, rain or shine, and we do our thing. And Sarah, you knew, would help a lot, and Hannah, my youngest, would help. Emily did a couple times. We have, like I said, 4 daughters, and as they were getting older, they were doing their own thing. But it was a great experience. They learned, I think, how to talk to people and sell your wares and what you make and explain things, and people ask questions, and you learn that what you make isn't necessarily for everybody, and not to be take it personally. If they like it, they like it. If they don't, they don't. It's not your thing. So, but there's a lot of lessons that I think they learned, and I think as they look back, they enjoyed that time, and it was a great time. Clint was the market director there that has since passed away, and it's just like, when people are gone, they don't realize I think the mark that you leave in life, and who the people that you touch. And Clint was one of those guys. He's this gruff guy, walk around, no, you can't do that, you can't do that. But it was just a great guy to be to have that role and to set things up and really enjoyed our family, and it was a great family thing to do. So
We just had a memorial service at North Kitsap Baptist Church for Anita Matthews. She was the secretary. She'd been the secretary there for a really, really, really long time.
So
I know that name.
Yep, Scott and Basita's daughter married
Vicki Matthews.
Yes.
Vicki Matthews.
yeah.
So her mother-in-law.
Married Josh
no, I didn't know that.
Matthews.
Okay.
Yeah.
Josh's mother, Anita,
Yeah.
just passed away.
Yeah.
And she was part of the nucleus of the church's, what the church was. And it was, you can feel her absence.
Yeah.
Certainly.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's a profound thing.
People like that, I think everybody actually leaves some mark for somebody. And I was listening this morning, actually on social media, on the Instagram. I was listening to.
Oh no!
Who's the
One
science
pour.
guy? Yeah, what was that?
One pour.
One pour. No, it's what it was Horace Mann. He was quoting Horace Mann. What he wants. Who's the science guy that does? He's a black individual. Talks about
Neil deGrasse Tyson.
Yes, and he was talking about what he
Yeah.
wants in his tombstone. And he said what Horace Mann had said, and make your last, be upset that you're dying until you make your mark on humanity, something to that sort, and make your a positive mark on humanity before you go. It's Yeah, find the quote. It really is. I thought this morning I read that and went, well, it's so true. And be upset that you're going if you haven't made your mark on humanity to help people along. And I think I feel like that's something that in the back of my mind. When people are coming through your line at the store, hopefully they're, you can brighten their day. Some sort of. I've heard so many different levels of conversation and where people are at, and you just never know where somebody's at when they come through. Everybody's got to eat, and they come through your line, and like when we met, you don't know where people are at, and sometimes they're way up, and sometimes they're like, they don't want to be there, but they got to eat, and so they're buying what they need,
right,
and they're emotionally where they are, and I try to meet them where people are, and I'm just the guy taking money, but I don't want to make
that's definitely a part of TNC's DNA though, because you don't get that. I don't get that at any other checkout line.
I don't recognize checkers from anywhere except TNC Paulsbo.
I recognize them from Costco, but it's so busy, and it's just they got to get you through so quickly that you don't there's no way you're going to make the same kind of connection with a checkout person like you will or can at TNC. I mean, even in the self-checkout one, usually there's a friendly exchange with whoever's monitoring the self-checkout on my way out. Really friendly, and it feels like a genuine connection.
That's good to know.
Yeah.
I think there's that intention is to make sure that there's some connection. And throughout the time that I've been there, and you did ask me earlier how I ended up there.
Yeah.
When I was working for Rick, the Kingston grocery store burned down. So in 1990, it's probably way before you guys were born.
I was born in 1990.
Yeah. Okay. There you go.
89.
Yeah. We had Sue was pregnant with she was pregnant with Emily, and so we had 2 daughters, and they both had chicken pox. And I'm over here, and Sue's over in Seattle because she was in the hospital at Stevens Hospital, and she was actually out by then and staying with my aunt, lived in North Seattle, and so she was staying with her. She's placenta previa, so she was either at my aunt's or at the hospital, one or the other. And having trouble, and it was concerning. And I had the 2 kids over here, and 4th of July weekend was, I think, the 29th of June or something. But anyway, whatever, July 2nd, maybe it was July 2nd. The grocery store burned down, and and Emily was born on July 2nd, the day after the fire. So I had 2 kids and no grocery store to work in.
Oh man!
Because I had at that point I was a grocery manager for Rick, because I had come back, and actually I got my biggest raise ever coming back from being just working as a bagger into, he wanted me to run, work in the grocery store. So he hired me as his grocery manager. So there was none of that. And I'm just kind of stunned. What do you do?
You had finally arrived and it burned to the ground.
Right. There was nothing left. It was a great place to grow and learn. But so I watched the rubble for a couple of weeks after that. He hired me as the overnight watch because they had to put a fence up around. Feds were involved because there was a post office that burned. And it was arson. Somebody had torched the place. Crazy.
Wow.
They can tell what kind of propellant it was, and where it started.
It's not the only instance of arson in Kingston around that time, was it? Wasn't there like a
Didn't
there was
somebody
some
torch the lumber store?
there was like a
A rash of fires. Yeah. Yeah, there was something out in Hansville. There was a kid that was caught. It wasn't him. Nobody knew. They don't know who it was. It burned the store down. So anyway, so we had a whole crew of people that were out of work, and Don Nakata, the owner of TNC, and the president said, told Rick, anybody that wants to work for me, come work.
Wow.
And because their store got busy, there was no store in Kingston at that time. It was the only grocery store up north, and so I ended up going to work for TNC and Paulsbo Market. Actually, we had an old store, on Hostmark and 305. Now there's a Walgreens. We had that grocery store there, so that's where I went. So I didn't want to not do anything, and so I kind of needed to eat.
Yeah.
And so I ended up working there, and that's when, in 1990, he hired me in July. Actually, July 17th is my hire date. 1990, and so I was 27 and had 3 kids, and it was just another tumultuous change of life, just kind of happened, and that's how I ended up there. I went back actually for about 5 weeks and worked for Rick, and I could see the writing on the wall, and it just was not going to be a good place to start, because what he had done is he rebuilt and rebuilt the whole complex and started put the Thriftway in. And so I did all the hiring, I think, and then it was like, no, I'm not gonna. I'm gonna go back to the other store. They hired me, Larry, and thankfully hired me as the front end manager at Paulsville Market, and so I was there for since then. So they kept my hire date, and that was like a year later after he rebuilt, and I was because I worked night crew for 9 months.
Night crew,
which means overnight at Paulsville. So I checked for the summer that 1990, and then I think in September I started with another guy named Steve Strickland, who's been around. You know Steve?
Boom, yeah,
Yeah.
Huge. His family. So do you know the Bryants up in Eglon?
Yeah.
So the Bryants, they're kind of sort of in-laws with me, and the Stricklands and
Didn't some of them move up to Alaska?
Yeah, the Pelican General Store.
All
yeah,
right.
yeah. Steve Strickland is instrumental in my family's life.
Yeah, Steve's a good
growing
guy.
up. So, yeah.
So
anyway.
he came over from Bainbridge because he was working there, and we both we worked together on Paulsville Market night crew, and I learned a lot of stuff there too.
Yeah,
so.
his daughter married, what's Jalen's general manager that worked for him? Tall, really tall, skinny guy.
Oh, Daniel Kelly.
Daniel Kelly is his wife is.
Her maiden name is Strickland.
Yes.
Oh,
Oh,
okay.
Our kids grow up.
I know, right?
Oh, wow.
Okay, so you had been at Central Market you've been there a long time. Kind of one of the questions we wanted to ask you is kind of the instrumental, the part that a local grocery store plays, and then I'm sure you were there when like Walmart comes to town.
Oh yeah,
and
I
like
remember that.
how does that affect our community, and like what you knew like before and after like these big grocery stores came to town, and like the dynamic that played in our community, and the people you were seeing on a consistent basis, and then maybe stopped seeing because Walmart may have come and blown prices out of the water. How did that affect you guys?
Were they open? In other words, I don't know that it really had an effect.
Okay.
I remember talking to Don Nakata. I don't know if you know who he is, and he was the owner that at the time he had just retired from being store director. So I think their nephew, Larry Nakata was the store director at our store, and Don was still around. So I didn't have a lot of interaction with him, but he told me one time, and this relates to your question, when Albertsons opened, so this goes way back, because when I moved to Paulsville, the Albertsons complex, or I guess where Rite Aid is now, that was all a golf course. And so there was nothing there, and Highway 305 was a 2-laner that went through town up until they put that in. And when Albertsons came to town, I think Don, he was looking for the letter. He didn't find it at the time, but there was some "we're going to bury you" kind of thing, and and we're going to take you out. And
Albertson said that?
Yeah, it was some. He, like I said, Don was looking for the letter, and he had moved out of his office, couldn't find it, but he just laughed, and it's the whole intention behind, I think, our company is really it's how you treat people, and it's indicated with the people that had stayed with our company for so long.
Yeah.
I felt like the young guy when I came. All these other guys I work with had been there for 10 years longer. And so many of them have like 40 years if they, stick around. And so when Walmart came to town, it was the same kind of thing. It's like, all right, they're going to open up, and it's just more competition. But, as things go along, the community has grown. There's more folks, and there's more people. And you don't have, you still have the people that are I guess the core of the town are still around. They're still shopping, but I didn't notice a lot of faces disappearing. But over time, of course, as people pass on and you miss that. And now we're all seeing that now because all those people that were there, many of them are gone, especially through COVID. What a weird time. Gosh,
that was wild.
Well, yeah, you were telling me how you were a AMT and got out before that. And many of your friends, you said, dropped out because of the pressure and how they have to do things. And
that's when I dropped out.
Yeah. I mean, I just can't imagine even being in the medical industry, and they deemed us as essential services, so we were open. It was great to get to work. There's nobody on the road. I could get to work real quick. And it was just an odd freaking time.
Yeah,
just
very
kind of
pressurized.
And the response from the administration and weird. It just like now. I won't talk political, but anyway.
Follow me to Texas.
You can edit that out. I intentionally not going to bring any of that up. Sorry. So you did ask me something. I'm trying to remember what you asked me.
So how.
Oh, how it affected us.
How it affected you, or just in general, how being a smaller local grocery store and having that experience with your community versus somebody like Walmart comes to town and opens up.
And I think Walmart certainly serves a purpose. I mean, they have cheap stuff, but I think that's not what it's all about. And I think you mentioned the word community, and I don't know. I'm sure they have some sort of, wherever humans are, they're going to interact however they do. But I think I feel pretty lucky that I ended up working for the company that I did because of the way that they treat the employees and the way that they express business in general. Is it's not all about profit and loss. You have to have that. You're going to have profit. You're going to have some loss, but taking risks but it's how you treat people and how we are led as far as the general overall direction of being that person and making a decision, being freed up to help somebody. And the intention is to build those bridges and build that relationship with the community. And that was ingrained in all of us. And, as you have a transition, which we have gone through the last few years, we've got a new CEO and things are changing. And it's not bad. It's just what it is. And I think you have to survive in a business environment now, and it's certainly not. It's kind of way above my pay grade as far as overlooking as an industry. But there are very few owner operators anymore. I mean, there used to be a bunch of them. And do you guys remember Associated Grocers? Yeah, Associated Grocers was a co-op, and they were all owners of small stores that got together, and they built this warehouse system that supported all the independents. So the Red Apple Markets, the Thriftway, those were all labels under and ad groups under Associated Grocers. Well, as time goes on, the wholesale industry went through some changes a few years back. The owners decided to sell to SuperValue, and so it became a contractual thing. So you have now owners that are buying from a different, an independent group. Not you don't have say. So there was some other things that happened before that, but they ended up in the end selling to SuperValue, and now that's all changed. So our supplier situation said that was kind of the first big changes that I started seeing. But how you treat people, where you get groceries, and how you treat people are different, and that's one thing. And so I think how we've all been taught is just to it's making sure that people get what they need. And finding whatever that is, and often it comes with, ma'am, have a great day, and or can I give you a cookie or a sticker? We've got Mindy who gives stickers to little kids at the front end. It's great.
Can I get a hot tortilla?
Yeah, I think it's being okay to do that and not worried that you're going to get written up or whatever, and you're freed up to help people. And there's not this pressure. And so when Walmart came, it was like, and Tom was like, "Oh yeah, they're coming." And they one of the guys that I work with, his brother worked for Walmart. And, "Oh, we're gonna bury you." And
Wow.
are you? Yeah. No, not really. You know,
Well, you guys are always busy. Every time I go there, it's always busy.
Oh,
Yeah,
that
this
would be
last year
so
was
sad.
different.
Could you imagine actually if Walmart had done that? That would be so sad.
Yeah.
Why would somebody?
Where would I get my biscuits and gravy?
In some places, I'm sure it did.
Yeah, I
You know,
know,
because of
and how
price.
tragic.
Yeah.
How tragic. I couldn't. I mean, it would. Paulsbo would suffer greatly if something like that were to happen to an establishment like TNC.
I agree. Yeah, it would not be. It would be the homogenization of, you know, just like all the small places are going out of town. But you know, there's the way you look at it. But I think they wanted to survive, and right now we're going through that, not survival mode, but you have to stay on the cutting edge, and you have to stay relevant. And I think our company is just doing just that right now.
For sure.
And the way that they're headed, you know, some choices have to be made that, you know, may be unpopular with the staff, but it's just the way things. I think you have to keep moving forward. You can't look back to, oh, this is how it used to be, and you know, we're not selling. You know, things get discontinued for a reason. People stop buying them. So as you end up losing product, you know, then the people that used to buy that aren't there anymore, and they don't need it because it's not relevant. And so, kind of simplistic, but I think mostly it's just the relationships and the teaching that we had. We had as I was a manager, grocery manager there for 14 years, and I went to a few courses which our company had paid for. And one of the classes that I took, I learned about true self and who you are. And they gave us all words describing our true self. Have you guys ever heard that? That.
I mean, I've heard the term true self, but not in an official capacity or anything.
And this was kind of part of the Elise McConnell was one of the teachers that we had. And so my words are connection, power, awe, love, and trust. And that described me as far as they could see as a person. And I kind of like, you know, awe and what? And power? And it was just an odd kind of collection of descriptive words. But connection really hit home because I always have had this, I don't know, innate need to connect with people. And maybe that's why I'm doing what I'm doing and stayed in grocery for so long. Kind of probably drive some people crazy. I'm sure. Going back, you know, to the counselor thing. One of the things that I discovered as a 57-year-old man that I had ADD, that I was diagnosed with ADD, and you know what? What's that? So I told my brothers. I got two older brothers, and they go, "Well, yeah, we knew that." His brothers are brutally honest.
Oh my God!
And but it was just one of the the alcohol thing. That was one of the things that Ken had me, you know, take this test, and I took it as a 79 question test, and you go through and answer all these questions, and the first one I wasn't, you know, I was like below the mark, so there's a scoring card, and he said, well, you can take it with somebody you trust and love, and they can, you know, answer it with you and change your answer if you want. So of course Sue and I took it, and some of the questions we get to, so, and I say this, and she goes, oh no, you do this, and so I changed some of them, and it pushed me over the edge. So I it's fine. I never knew it, but it certainly has affected, you know, unknowingly how I respond naturally and how I relate to people. Sometimes it isn't what I think it is, and you just kind of have to. I think for that, help me be a little more self-aware. So coupled with this other thing, this class that I took was kind of a baseline understanding of relationships, and that was, again, going back to what you asked about earlier, and the store of how it's
What sets
Walmart
it
opened up,
apart,
but I
yeah.
think people are dying for some sort of connection, and the way that people, if you go into a grocery store, I remember my friend Derek, who teaches for the art college, he used to run the Artist's Edge up at Paulsbo. Anyway, we were standing there talking, and he's, what I like about your store is you look over, and look, those people over there are just chatting with an employee, and then there's a couple of people over here talking, and he said, people aren't unhappy; they're happy.
And the new salad bar,
It's cool.
really good,
Yeah, good.
really good.
The changes that we've made, the restaurant and all of that, are really have been accepted. And I think people, are kind of irritated with us moving stuff around and all the big changes.
I know in high school, a slice of pizza and a soda
Oh yeah.
at Central Market was like...
Central Swiss is legendary.
Yeah, you didn't exist in the city of Paulsbo until you had that. Until you ingested a slice of pizza and a soda at Central Market. And for a long time, as the pizza at Central Market went, so went Paulsbo. But now I think the salad bar is almost like the go-to
you
now.
get older, you make different food choices.
That's true. Maybe
So
that's,
to the food, because you guys have been known for food forever, I was wondering.
Yeah, we are a grocery store.
Yeah. No, just like, So
I bought toilet paper there once.
the biscuits and gravy recipe from like 2010. Where'd that go?
I
feel like
am
it's-
not privy to that.
Okay.
Yeah,
It's
I'm
it's
sorry
slightly
I
different
can't
now.
answer.
Still very
Yeah,
good.
Sure.
Still very good, but
Yeah.
I don't know. 2010. I don't know who was working there making the biscuits and gravy, but
That's your lost memory of where is it?
I guess.
Yeah, gosh, I don't know.
Bacon cheddar burger.
The bacon.
Yeah, bring it back.
The bacon cheddar burger.
You could. And
We got to know. Is it Mick? Right,
Mick, the chef, cook,
the guy at the grill.
glasses, 5
Mick.
o'clock chef.
Mick.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, we developed.
that's when we had the grill and the the goldfish
Yep.
pond out there.
We developed quite a good relationship with him, and he kind of knew what we liked when we came in. So that was good.
Yeah. Oh, there you go. So it's those kind of little connections that keep people coming back. They come back to see the people that they know and trust and get to know. And I think, and I can't say anything other than it's more of an intention, an allowance of not, you don't have somebody get to work. It's you trust that people are going to do what they need to do. You're trained well and you're knowledgeable because you're interested. And I think that's what and this also goes back to the hiring. You hire people that are interested in people.
Trustworthy.
Yeah. And that and interested in food. And that's one of the primary things that we talk about. And when I was doing the hiring is, what do you like to cook? What do you like to eat? What do you like to do? What do you do for fun? And what interests you? And what interests you about our company? And I think a lot of people see what you guys are talking about, of how the feeling that you get. And going back to that conversation I had with Derek, and that's what he was saying. It's how you feel. It's how you come in. Nobody wants to go into a place and feel uncomfortable and like, gosh, I shouldn't be here. Some stores it's palpable. You can feel the uneasiness or whatever. If you're tuned into that. And I think our company does a good job of making sure
Welcoming
to be
you.
aware of that.
Yeah.
And it's the experience that drives the whole operation. And if you don't have a good experience, people aren't going to come back. And it's how you're treated. And so it's simple, but it's not easy because you have big companies that are coming to town and it's heavy duty competition. And as you look, like I told you earlier, I think there were so many owner operators. Now they're not. There are not very many left across the country, and it's really changed. It's become more corporate and big companies buying up all these other little ones and running them. The lumber industry, my son-in-law was in the same thing. Buying up all the small.
Most industries seem to be going through that.
Yeah.
Huge conglomerates coming through, picking up the little guys.
So I'm thankful to work for a small company, and that it's is playing in the big arena.
Yeah.
And do it well. They run 6 stores, and they were a huge part of AG, Associated Grocers at the time, and the volume that we would do.
What's the original location?
There was one originally on Bainbridge is where they started, and so in 1957 they opened the new market. They had another one prior to that, but the history of the family is all based on Bainbridge.
Okay.
And so then they opened Paulsbo, I think in Paulsbo Market in 1975, I believe. And then I think in the 80s they bought, Ballard Market's in there. They had Overlake Market. They sold that. And then I think then they ended up getting Shoreline. And then we had another one that they sold, the property sold. And what was that one? I know its store number is 214. Anyway, they had to close that store because there's a big Fred Meyer over in Seattle. Probably when we leave here, I'll remember the name of it. It's been so long ago. So then they opened Mill Creek in 2000 as a central market. So we had 3 central markets at the time. It was Mill Creek, and Paulsbo Central Market was the first one, and then Shoreline they remodeled. So it's. And we do a lot of volume. Yeah. And people really trust the food that we sell, the produce. We're known for that. And these guys are trained professional food vendors. They know their stuff. And again, I think as a general rule, we're treated well, and then therefore I think the idea is that you'll treat people well. Because you give out, you get what you give out.
Yeah.
And I think that's so true in life, in any operation.
For sure.
I think what you're saying is very interesting. And like when you talk about how it's about how you feel, and I'm kind of like, what is it that but I think so much of it is just rooted in the intention of the people who are running that store, because visually and aesthetically, you could walk into a Whole Foods and you could be like, these are very similar. Town and Country and a Whole Foods. But when you were talking about that, I was like, what difference do I notice when I walk into a Whole Foods versus when I walk into a Town and Country? And it is a feeling. It is a feeling. The color, the way the colors that you see and how they set it all up, what the floor looks like, the salad bar, they're vaguely similar. They're both better than Walmart, but there is a feeling, and it is something that it's like it's hard to describe. But there's a marked difference. I would much rather walk through a Town and Country door than Whole Foods. Whole Foods will get you by, but
and it's great, and they'll get you by. And I think like you mentioned about the Walmart when they came to town, and when Albertsons came to town, or now they're Safeway. It is that. It's how people, I think they don't even know sometimes. I think they'll think about it, why they go to our stores. They'll go somewhere to get cheap stuff, but then they always come back.
Yeah.
And hopefully it's to see.
And they'll keep coming back. Well, thank you so much. We are at time.
All right.
Where
you said it would go quick.
Yeah, it goes pretty quick.
Does.
Where so when people come to Central Market, do you have a certain lane that's like yours? They can come see you.
I'll
anytime?
be up front.
You'll be up front.
Like I told you before, I switched jobs when I came back. I did have my knees replaced, and so one in October and one in January. And so when I came back, I switched jobs, and I'll be up front. So checking.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for joining us.
You're welcome.
Thank you, everybody. We'll see you next week.
Okay, see ya.